Hello and a very good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us here on our first webinar from the Spotlight series. We have with us Dr. Emmanuel Verghese, who is the Executive Director of the India Leather Industry Foundation. He has over 35 years of experience in the wastewater treatment industry and has designed and commissioned over 450 wastewater treatment plants, including some of the largest in the world. So thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, for joining us on our first session. We are really excited to hear what you have to say, uh, especially considering you're a world-renowned expert in this area. So as we go along, Dr. Emmanuel has also prepared some very interesting infographics that I shall be sharing on my screen, which will help hopefully make the presentation the talk session more interesting. We will have the session where Dr. Manuel will talk us through a lot of points. And at the end of the session, we will have time for a Q&A session, during which time everybody can ask all the questions. And Dr. Manuel will try and answer everybody's questions that they have. So, Dr. Manuel, I hope you are keeping safe and well during these troubled times. And I hope all our attendees are as well. So, before we start, I just wanted to ask you, we're seeing so many WhatsApp forwards and emails and news articles being shared on the improved air and water quality. So, as starting point, could you just tell us what is your opinion on this? Is this actually something to stay? Like, is it going to sustain?
Yeah. First of all, thank you all for joining us today. And Chandni, thank you for your nice words and a nice introduction. Now, coming back to your question, of course, these days, it is all the information source are all overwhelming and we get all kind of information. Some of them says that we are seeing game change, the environment changes so much. And we have even some WhatsApp I even received saying that the ozone hole has repaired itself.
Oh.
Some of them are too much exaggerated, some are realistic. So generally, coming back to your question, I would divide it into two sessions. Let's see the impact on the resources first, energy and water, and then the quality of environment. In case of resources, the water, there is a marginal improvement because the industries have stopped their consumption, and some activities like commercial establishments also have stopped. So there is something like 25% improvement in consumption of water. With respect to energy, I was told that the whole country scenario is that there is a reduction of about 35% to 40%, depending on the region. But when it comes to the quality of environment, obviously the best improvement happened in the air. You get also lots of WhatsApp saying that you can now see Himalaya mountains from Chandigarh, and the entire Delhi air has been now cleared. The air quality index have fallen down less than 100. All these are good. Actually, the reason is now there are no automobiles, no industry, no construction. So because of these reasons, the air quality has definitely improved. Overall, they expect about 50 to 70% improvement. But whether this is going to sustain, we will have to see. It could also be a temporary thing. Once lockdown is lifted and people go back to their work, we do not know how it will be. Let's hope things will improve. And with respect to water quality, there is definitely an improvement, but not to the extent of what we hoped for. There is a reported improvement of about 30% in various rivers. Basic reason is the discharge of industries have been stopped. With respect to other like noise or land pollution, you could say there is definitely an improvement because especially there is no noise. You can even hear the birds chirping in the morning. So today they are actually out in the open and we are in cages.
Yeah,
we are actually in jail.
That's true. That's true.
I think
So,
overall we could say about 30 to 40% improvement has been done.
Okay. And when you talk about water as a resource, how much of the water as a resource is used in industries, like as a total consumption? So if you talk about that.
Oh, actually, that is the reason why the improvement is not so drastic. You are very right in asking this question. In India, about 70% of the total water consumed is used in agriculture, where there is no much of a restriction at all or regulation at all. 20% is consumed in the urban sector, that for municipal supplies. There also, the management is fairly moderate. I would say moderate. In case of industry, the 10% consumption is for industry. But out of that, interesting part of it is, out of this 10%, 70% itself, that is total of 7%, is consumed by one single industry, that is the thermal power industry. So altogether, only 3% of the total water is consumed by industries. I mean all the industries, tannery, textile, paper, everything put together. So that doesn't obviously make much of a change because of the closure of industries.
Okay. And these industries that you talk about, all the different industries that use the water, how do they treat the water? How do they treat all their wastewater? So do they have large effluent treatment plants, or what is the structure?
See, we have both common and individual effluent treatment plants in the country. The medium to large industries generally go for their own effluent treatment plants, and isolated industries, of course, also have to go for their own ETPs. The SME sector industries, especially in clusters, they have joined together and has created common effluent treatment plants. CETP is a concept actually has been perfected among all our neighbor countries, or even you could say in, I think that is a previous slide. No? That is one. Actually, this is the flowchart of a common effluent treatment plant or any other large effluent treatment plant. You could see the first, obviously, the first treatment session is something like an equalization tank. For the people who are not very familiar with this treatment system, I would say the objective of equalization is to mix all kind of effluent together so that we get a homogenized effluent. This is one objective. The second objective is we get water from industries at different times in a gush. For the treatment plant, which works 24 hours, we need to regulate it over 20 hours or 24 hours. For that one, the equalization tank balances the flow. So equalization is a first step where you get the effluent homogenized and balanced. Then there could be a series of screens. There can be screens before equalization also, and some cases it is after the equalization. The screen is segregating those particles which can damage the treatment system or the equipments in the treatment system. In general, we have also primary treatment in industrial effluent treatment. So, for example, textile, some of the textile industry removes the primary treatment for color. Tannery is used to segregate the heavy metals and the suspended solids. And the load to the biological treatment system is also reduced. So primary treatment system is essentially with plain settling, or sometimes the settling aided with some chemicals, so that the effluent leaving the primary treatment is clear, which has got only mostly organics, which will be treated in the aeration tank or anaerobic tank in the biological treatment. These days, the biological treatment plant is mostly aerobic. Aerobic means you will have to cultivate aerobic bacteria by way of giving air. And the air is supplied either by surface aerator, which works like a mixer in the big surface of the aeration tank, or by diffused aeration, where you inject air through diffusers or some sparger jets. so that the entire tank gets aeration. And using this air, the bacteria converts the pollution into carbon dioxide and water, so that all the pollutants in the water can be removed. To get the biological load maintained in a specific level, this outlet of aeration tank is settled in a clarifier, and whatever is a settled sludge, which is essentially the bacteria, is pumped back to the aeration tank. The sludge, which is coming from the primary treatment, and some portion of the biological sludge is wasted. These two are mixed together, thickened in a thickener, and taken to a dewatering machine. It can be a centrifuge, it can be a filter press, it can be a vacuum filter. And in some cases, very small plants, they use sludge drying beds. And the dried sludge is disposed separately. Otherwise, I think that is.
Dr. Emmanuel, I think you've turned your
Water
audio.
leaving? Oh, sorry. It was a call. I would do one thing. I will just uh, disable, but then disabling also will disable the Wi-Fi. No, I was using the mobile Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, I will take care of it. Now,
Okay.
one thing about it is this treated effluent leaving the treatment plant generally is free from all organics, heavy metals, etc., and usually very clear and colorless, but it still has all the salt in it. So some cases where the salt need to be removed, they have got a system to remove the salt, which is very sophisticated. And normally after removal of salt, there is no point in discharging that water, so they reuse it back. And such systems are called ZLD system. So we have two kind of thing, the basic effluent treatment and effluent treatment with ZLD.
Okay. And so this is quite an extensive system which they have set up. So do the industries get funding, or are these set up by government or private?
That's a good question. Actually, the private industry, of course, have to manage the funding on their own. Of course, they get some benefit in uh, uh, depreciation, etc. But otherwise, they are funding the whole. In case of CETP, some percentage, generally about 50%, is given as subsidy by government. The rest is taken either as a loan or as a contribution from the members. So this is the capital is generated. The operating cost of the CETP is entirely met by themselves. There is no subsidy for that.
Okay. Okay. And now with the lockdown that has had to take place, what is the current status of these CETPs and ETPs?
Okay, that is actually a very good question. This is one of the reasons we wanted to have this discussion today. See, what has happened was this the lockdown was totally a new thing. It's happened so suddenly. Everybody got surprised, and there was no standard procedure how to deal with such a kind of situation. We should have kept some kind of an SOP ready, but we also caught by surprise, and there was no SOP ready. So in many cases, what has happened, they just abandoned the ETP as it is. When they switch off the industry, and they also switch off the ETP. And some CETP also, CETPs are, by the way, allowed to work because it is our essential services. So they are allowed to work. But in some cases, what has happened, they have also abandoned the plant as it is. It is a very, very dangerous thing. It should not have been done like that. That we will discuss in the coming points. But at the moment, what has happened, many of these plants have been abandoned in various levels of cleaning levels. And what should have been done, if you look at it, oh, sorry, this is also coming later, no? This is about the operation cost of the ZLD. Okay. Okay. Now, what should have been done by the industry is that, first of all, we have to think about the risks in relation to safety. And then there are technical risk involved. And then there are managerial risk involved. So what should have been done is, once we stop the plant, we should have taken all the pre-treatment, emptied first.
Yes.
The pre-treatment has got, let's say, settling tanks and all. So all the sludge should have taken out, and that all the water should be pumped out to the CETP. What is the risk there is that if you don't do it, later stage, what will happen is, when you try to clean it up, the main problem happens that time. You know, the issue related to hydrogen sulfide and the people getting into accidents when they try to clean the tanks, all happens because the sludge or the water is allowed to decompose over a period of time. And when you try to clean it up later, you get into accidents. One problem with the hydrogen sulfide is, at a lower concentration, you can smell it. It has got a rotten egg smell, as we study in the school. But in a higher concentration, it doesn't smell at all. So many people think that there is no hydrogen sulfide, they get into the tank and dies. This is a major problem. And the second thing to be done is that all the conveyance lines and the tank should be emptied. There also all the sludge need to be removed. And then the receiving sump in the CETP, then equalization, then the primary clarifier, then the aeration tank. Aeration tank, any excess effluent which is overflowing can be taken out to the treatment system. Otherwise, you can pump it back, but the aeration tank need to be maintained at a certain level. In case of ZLD, what you need to do is that ZLD is involving mostly the membrane system. So any water retaining in the membranes can damage the membranes. So what should have been done? I think majority of the ETPs have done this part correctly. They have taken out the water, drained out, but many of them has not bothered to fill it up with preservative chemicals. You have to drain it out and do a CIP, which is a cleaning, and then put the preservatives, lock it till we restart. And in case of evaporators, which is a part of the ZLD, you need to take out all the saline liquor in sequence. You know, last time what has happened, very interesting case is, in one of the CETP, when the evaporator was stopped, they took out the saline liquor from the last calendar year, stored it separately. What they thought, anyway, I have spent so much money in evaporating it to something like a 15% concentration. Why to start from the beginning? I can keep that concentrated liquor. They kept it, and when the evaporator was restarted, they pumped it to the first calendar year. And the entire system got immediately chopped, because the evaporator is designed in such a way that it has got incremental TDS levels, salt levels. In this case, you need to take out the salt solution one by one, take it to the reject collection tank, and keep it that way, so that you can start with it when actually the operation is resumed. That was a question. And you had this question related to the cost, no?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, actually that was the 2 slides before.
Yeah, it's a different slide. Yeah.
This is the one.
Yes.
Contrary to what we think, even if the CETP or ETP is switched off, there is a cost involved. The cost involved is basically, I have given the comparison of both. You could see with respect to ZLD and with respect to basic treatment. In both the cases, you could see about 20 to 25% of the cost is required, even when the plant is under shutdown. This is basically because you will have to pay all the salaries, and then you need to pay a minimum demand charges to the electricity boards, and then some chemicals are required for cleaning and all, and some maintenance is anyway required. So all these add to the cost, and some 25% still need to be paid. So I have given the cost in terms of 1000 meter cube per day capacity. Per cubic meter, when the CETP is running, the basic effluent treatment plant cost about 50 rupee per cubic meter, or 15 rupees per MLD, million liters. In case of ZLD, this is almost 10 times. You will get about 500 rupees per cubic meter and about 5 lakh rupees per day for million liters. So proportionately, you will have to 20% of that one. So that means we will have to still spend about some 10,000 rupees for the CETP for 1 MLD and some 1 lakh rupee per day for the ZLD CETP. You know, the impact is the CETP like Ranitech, which is in the Ranipet, which is treating the tannery effluent. They spend about 3 crore rupees or something like 400,000 US dollars per month for treating the wastewater, about 1.5 MLD to 2 MLD per. So now they will have to spend about 50 to 60 lakh rupees, or let us say about 8,000 rupees, or let's say 80,000 US dollars still per month. It is going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is not and this is excluding whatever, because of improper shutdown, what they've done to any membranes which may need to be replaced. That's going to be another added cost as well. So
Yes,
when
it's always accidents.
yeah, so that's going to be like quite a improved thing. So once the lockdown gets lifted, then will these for these CTPs to actually get back into operation, do they have to follow, like, you know, if they have to follow social distancing norms, and even for restarting, is there any proper SOP as well as keeping in mind the social distancing norms? Can they go back into operation?
Okay, that's a good question. With respect to the social distancing which the government is prescribing, I don't anticipate any problem. The basic reason is the CETP does not employ many people, and those people are not working in one location. They are all scattered. So social distancing should not be a problem, but getting the people itself is a problem, because they will have to come to the CETP. And today reaching there is actually a difficulty. But once you restart the plant, I said even while under shutdown, you need some operators to come to the CETP to keep this what you call the law. So apart from that part, there should have been an SOP definitely for recommissioning of the plant. Unfortunately, we don't have that one yet. And if the CETP so prefer, I think we can make one SOP and send it to them in detail, which has got all the steps. But at the moment, I will just lift out a few points which you are given here. Basically, you will have to start with the equalization tank once it start getting the effluent. So many people make a mistake. They are continuously receive the small quantity of effluent in the beginning till the equalization tank gets filled. And then they try to set it up to the aeration system, which cannot work out, because aeration system need stabilization time to come back to the full level. So the best thing you can do is, once you start getting some effluent, wait till it fills some 1/3 of the equalization tank to get the homogenization done, and then pump it to the primary treatment, but don't use the chemicals, because there is no point in removing the organic load when the aeration tank itself is not having organic load. So either no chemical or some polyelectrolyte or some small chemicals, and then pump it to the aeration system. Right now, if you keep the aeration unit running, now the aeration unit, we should not have too much of an aeration during the lockdown, because in that case, what will happen? The bacteria, since it has no food, it will start eating itself. So the bacterial level, MLSS, will go out in no time. So to prevent that one, and to prevent the settling of sludge into the diffusers, and to prevent septic conditions, you need to keep it under operation, some aeration even now. So for something like 1 month or 1.5 months, you should be able to keep some inventory biomass into that. So if the plant is restarted within 1 month's time, it's okay. Within something like 1 week, 10 days, you could commission it back. Suppose the lockdown extends for more period, let's say 2 months or more, then the bacteria will anyway die. You will have to bring in new sludge. But getting a new sludge also is a problem. because the other ETPs are also under shutdown. So either you will have to bring the sludge from the sewage treatment plant, or you should start with a specialty bacteria, or you should start with the basic age-old method of adding some cow dung as seeding and all. But then slowly, initially you will have to feed a little bit of effluent and allow the aeration to be actually a little more. You can keep the DO something like 3 to 4, and the F by M, what we are calling in our thing, as something like a 0.3 to 0.4 level. It is higher aeration levels, and add excess nutrients so that the biomass picks up very fast, and then slowly you can something like 2-3 weeks time, you can have enough bacteria in the aeration tank. Biological treatment then can take the full stretch.
Okay. Okay, so now is the time, I think, for all the CETPs and ETPs to start preparing the proper detailed protocols and SOPs for how they can go about, restarting and recommissioning all the systems. So hopefully that will reduce the damages to any damages that could have occurred, and they can have. So what we were able to get now is that it is very essential that for all the ETPs to have a written SOP written down, not just in terms of, in case there's another, hopefully there's not another pandemic, but for any natural disasters, any reason that these ETPs have to go into a sudden shutdown, there has to be a protocol for the entire system to follow and a methodology to follow. Because now there's such a lack of an availability of manpower to operate these ETPs, CETPs as well right now, and also because they're not allowed to operate in full with all the staff. Do they all have IoT for remote operation?
You have got a very important point, Chandni. You're right. Actually, what happened was we never thought of this situation. That was the truth. Now, IoT is there in 1 or 2 plants, but it is mostly used only for monitoring, no control. The operation is still done by the age-old manual labor. Now, whether we can continue is a big question. This kind of a situation is a reminder for us that be prepared for such a kind of thing. In India, I will just give you a comparison. In India, like a CETP, like a 4 MLD or 3 MLD plant, in Ranitech, for instance, employs about something like 60 to 100 people to manage the plant. I got a few projects in US, of course, before I came back to India. See, my one of was, I am sorry for that.
That's okay.
My second largest plant in US was about 570 million liters per day. That plant had only 7 operators.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas in a 4 MLD plant, we are employing something like 60. The reason is the level of automation. Now, in India, we take everything for granted. So we take even the labors for granted. So this definitely we need to have a relook, and we need to think about economization. Now, another concept is that when we were discussing with CETPs, when we go for upgradations, I used to ask them, can we go for an automation now? There used to be a lot of resistance. 2 reasons. One is that there is a fear that this automation system will not work in their corrosive environment. Second thing is, they say, why? After all, it is cheaper to go for labor. And some even go to the extent of saying that, after all, we are also expected to provide employment. Why should we replace it with this? But this need to change. Now, we need to look at it differently now. One of the reasons is even the industry itself may have to think more in this line. For example, the industry like tannery, they are going to have a shortage of manpower in future, because many of the people currently working in tanneries are old people. Their younger generation is not willing to work in that factories anymore. So we may have to think for more automation, more IoTs in factories as well as CETP. The CETP, we will definitely start looking at it.
Okay, so there's going to be a definite increase in demand for automation that they'd want to incorporate in any of their existing facilities. Okay, that's quite interesting. So, these CETPs that are all structured, as you were saying, they're all structured essentially as cluster units. And they have their SPVs that are created to service, and then they have different, all the members have their share capital depending on their fluent they release. How, now, because they're everybody's predicting, like, well, it's going to happen because of the recession that's also going to come in. There's going to be a large cancellation of orders, which means their income is going to reduce, but these CTPs have to keep operational, as we discussed, and it's still going to incur a heavy cost. How are they going to keep these CTPs operating and sustained?
That is the most important point of today. I would say that it is a very, very big issue, and it is a vicious circle in my opinion. See, I would visualize it like this. Now, you are talking about cancellation of order as in future tense. But what has happened is that its cancellation of order is already real. In some cases, all the transit, the material, the finished product which has been sent overseas already has been sent back. So cancellation of order is the major problem of today, even at the lockdown stage. And when we restart the production, it is going to be a big issue. And I would foresee a lot of casualty in that sector, especially in the
Okay.
SMEs. So assuming that the industry start with something like 10% or 15% of its total production,
Yeah.
that people will have to share the cost of the CTP. You know what will happen when you start receiving some plant and CTP start operating? They need to operate the plant in some level. So minimum something like 50% of the O&M cost may still be required. Now imagine today 100 people are supposed to share that cost, and suddenly 20 or 25 people will have to share that 50% of the cost. Their own problems in their profits and losses are one part, and this on addition to that losses, if they are given to their head, it is going to be a big burden on them, and that itself may create some problem for these people to close it down in future. So
Yeah.
I think this is an issue which we need to be prepared right now in the closure, in the lockdown period. We need to discuss it in detail. And that discussion should happen not in our level, but in the association or industry leaders level, industry association level, government level, because how we manage the economics is a cost. That there are ways and means. Of course, we are not experts in financial management. They should also involve their financial experts into that one and see there is a way out so that the CETP will not perish. One problem with the CETP is, especially ZLD, if you do not maintain it properly, this entire investment may collapse. It is a very sensitive issue, very sensitive plant. So you need to keep it in operation. You need to keep it maintained. If you do any kind of sacrifices there, the investment itself may go. So you will have a much more problem in future. So some way we have to find a solution how to manage the cost in the beginning. There can be a few options. For example, all these people have got the bank, and the banks are now presently dealing with a reasonable turnover. CETP like Vanitech in Vaniambadi, they spend about 30 crore rupees per year. And something like Ranitech may be also spending some 30 crore per year. So the banks are also having a sizable amount of turnover from these people. So they need to be taken into this board, and we will have to ask them whether they can extend some loans or some overdraft for the expenditure which come for the CTP. For instance, if they pay for the electricity out of a corpus fund as an overdraft, which we can pay over the period of something like 2 years, collected from them, that could be one thing. And the government can also be approached for some subsidies or moratorium for immediate payment for electricity and all, which we need to discuss with them. And we need to have dialogue with the pollution control. Because in the beginning, getting into a ZLD structure in one day may not be possible. So we will have to ask them to fix up realistic targets. after reopening, let's say 2 weeks later or 1 month later, you will get into a ZLD and all. So this needs a lot of consultation, a lot of discussion. But luckily, we have to go time now. Now we are discussing this one, and these CETP companies can also take it up with various levels and start be prepared for this.
So now that when you were talking about raising the discussions with the Pollution Control Board on the ZLD, can you just tell us what exactly is the ZLD policy currently in India?
Sorry, actually, I should have explained that earlier. ZLD or zero liquid discharge means literally that we are not supposed to discharge any drop of effluent, which means we will have to treat the effluent, bring it to the level of quality which we can use it back in cycle after cycle after cycle, so that there won't be any discharge at all. It is the highest level of pollution control, so that we don't discharge any wastewater and we use it back is the highest level of pollution control. So right now, the government of India has mandated ZLD for certain sectors, which is not fully compliant, but mandated. Something like, for example, distilleries. They have more or less achieved ZLD in most of their projects. Pharmaceuticals and many textile, major and medium to large textile industry, they are all gone for ZLD. But if you look at it as a sector, tannery or textile as one whole industry, only Tamil Nadu has got that implementation done so far. The entire sector has to go for ZLD. So they have gone for that one. But when putting up this concept, the logic of ZLD has not been understood by many. This is the tragedy.
Yeah.
When we discuss about the future of it, we will come back to this part.
Okay, so what do you think is like, what is your opinion of the policies? Is it good? Is it bad?
ZLD is inevitable in some cases. For example, let us take Vellore in Ranipet or Tirupur for the textile industry. We may have to go for ZLD there mandatorily. And if you look at the slide, you have got a lot of advantages and disadvantages. The advantages include you have got a full compliance for the legal part, and there will be no water scarcity for the industry, so there is no production loss. The industry will have a better image because there is no pollution. They have a better image with the public, with the government, with the buyers. Many of the buyers these days prefer ZLD because of their back at their markets. They can tell their buyers that this is coming at zero pollution. And in many cases, the impact is real. For example, in Ranipet, earlier, Chandri, you do not know, I do not know whether you know it or not. Earlier days, when we come to Chennai, we can identify each of this industrial cluster, not by looking at it, by keeping our nose open. You could see when you come to Waniyambadi, yeah, this is Waniyambadi, and then Ambur, and then Ranipet, like that, you are able to say the industrial cluster sitting in a train because of the smell. Today, if you know, I'm quite confident that you won't have that scenario anymore. The public also have realized that the industry is not as bad as they used to consider as it to be. One of the example is many of the CETP, the backyard of the CETP, people have actually started buying land for the residential purpose, which was unthinkable some time back. So these are the benefits of the CETP. It also ensure that there is no pollution for the groundwater. This point, I would like you to understand it a little more detail. The reason being, for example, many people, when they talk about the ZLD, they talk about the recovery of water. They say, oh, this much of water we save. But I would say that is a very small portion of the actual saving. Now, let us take the case of the Palar River or the river in Tirupur. But let's take Palar River. Palar, there is no surface flow, but there is subsurface flow. And some 25, 30 years back, the government used to pump water from there. They used to supply it to the municipalities. They stopped it some 20, 25 years back because the water quality became so bad. Now, this point need to be understood that the TDS, the salt in the drinking water, we have got a limit according to WHO and our own ISA limits. The desirable limit is 500 milligram per liter TDS. The maximum TDS is, we can say generally 750 milligram per liter TDS. And in Palar, before the industry comes in, the general TDS is about 500. That means some addition of some 200 or 300 milligram per liter will make that water unusable for drinking. In such a case, let us say effluent from tannery like SCETP, which has got a TDS of 20,000 TDS. So 1 cubic meter of that wastewater, fully treated, only salt is there. If you discharge that water into this river, 1 cubic meter will make something like 70 cubic meter unusable. So let us say in a CTP like Ranitech or Sitco or Vanitech or Ambutech, they recover about, let us say, 1 MLD or 1.5 MLD, 1,500 meter cube per day, they recover back. Indirectly, what they are doing is that they are preventing so much of water going into the river, and by that, they are saving something like 70 times of that water saved for public consumption. Now, Ranitech may be saving directly 2,000 meter cube. Indirectly, they will be saving 100,000 meter cube, which is 100 MLD, which is not a small quantity at all. And now I can substantiate this thing with this way that, you know, some 2-3 years back, you started seeing the subsurface water salinity in this river started coming down every year. The first year, there was a reduction of 9%. Second year, there was a 19% reduction. Third year, it was 27% reduction. And today, the TDS in the water in Palar has come down to 750 and below. So the government of India, Tamil Nadu, has started pumping back that water. Kodayanji Water Works today started pumping back that water to the Vellore, which is a great achievement. So this is one of the basic achievements if you go for ZLD. And in some cases like Tirupur or Ranipet or Vellore, this may be inevitable because we don't have any other discharge point where it can absorb this much of wastewater. The disadvantages of ZLD is well known. That is, one is it is very costly in implementation, very costly in operation, very, very costly in operation.
How much is the cost? Sorry.
It's a good question. Actually, I would say about 500 rupee per cubic meter. How much it is? Something like, let's say, how many dollars it's coming to? About $15? Oh, yeah. No, sorry. So 500 rupee per cubic meter is a lot of money. Something, even if it you say it's at 6 or 8 US dollar per cubic meter, it is the highest in the world. Nowhere they spend effluent treatment cost in excess of something like 3 or 4 US dollars per meter cube. Here, if you are spending $8 per US dollars per cubic meter, we are spending actually 2 times or 3 times of what is the international norm.
And what is the energy consumption per meter cube when you have to treat it?
Very good question, because the electricity is one of the principal component of this cost. You could see about 35 to 40% of the total cost comes to electricity. So if you talk about 500 rupees as a total, you could see about 150 to 200 rupees per meter cube is spent only on electricity. So that about 2 to 3 US dollars per cubic meters. And the other disadvantage involved, it also produces some salt which need to be disposed. It is that disposal is still a question. We are still exploring various options, and then it is having a very high carbon footprint, and it is a very sophisticated system. It needs a lot of technical support. It needs a lot of discipline by the members and all. These are the disadvantages and the advantages.
Okay, so it's quite a detail. So it's quite energy intensive and very expensive, the whole setup, even though, you know, we are able to see good results at the end of it. But you know, the ZLD policy, so is it implemented across or only, so it's completely you know, compulsory only in Tamil Nadu. I don't think in any of the states in India it's only, I think, given as a guideline. I don't think it's fully
As a
implemented.
whole industry, yes. As a whole industry, yes.
Okay. So, but do you think the ZLD policy, there should be some, you know, the way it is being implemented in India, should it change in any way? Like, for instance, units located where, supposing they can discharge into the sea, perhaps, or
Definitely, definitely. Actually, ZLD, we need to understand it in the proper perspective. It is not a uniform or a universal Panaka for everything. See, where there are other options available, that should be given the preference. For instance, if the industry is located near to the sea discharge is the best option. There is no point in spending so much money in recovering that water. Now, I will bring back this question of the perception of people about ZLD. Many of the government officials start thinking this as a way out for the water problem in future. As we discussed in the beginning, the consumption of water by this industry is very small. It is only about 3%. By making this 3% recovering their entire water back, spending so much of money, is not going to create any major difference in the water scenario. I would rather say it will be much cheaper and much more simple to collect the what you call runoff water or sewage water even, and purify that and use it back instead of using the industrial effluents. So if there is other options available, like sea discharge, in many of the international situations, most of the countries in US or Europe, they, after some pre-treatment, the industry is allowed to discharge the effluent into the municipal sewage treatment plants for co-treatment with the municipal sewage. Now, why we are discussing this issue here itself is also because of that reason. Because our problem, because of the sudden shutdown of the ETP, is not applicable in many European or American countries, because their STP, the human consumption of water and its discharge continues. So their STP is working as usual. So
yes.
by cutting off the industrial effluent does not make any much difference. And when the industrial effluent come back also, it is not a big difference. But here, we have got two problems, which I should also mention. Because our industries are also far away from the urban areas. For instance, Vellore, you don't have enough sewage to mix it up. And there is no sewerage even to convey the sewage into a central pipeline, through a pipeline to the central plant. So if it is in Chennai, like in the case of Madhavaram CTP in Chennai, they treat it basically and then mix it with the sewage and then send it as a effluent without the ZLD. So ZLD need to be resorted to as a last resort.
Okay.
And
so where they don't have a discharge point, where it's, or depending on the effluent, I guess.
Yep. And the way in, please.
No, I just wanted to ask, you know, in the other countries, like for instance, Bangladesh or Singapore or other African countries, how do they, what kind of, do they all have ZLD as well?
Actually, I was saying about Bangladesh and African countries and most of the European countries, I could say no.
Okay.
Because most of them are still contemplating ZLD, most of them. But ZLD is not a new concept. It was there in America In the early 70s itself, they started making ZLD mandatory for certain segments, mostly the power industry. Uh, Essentially, the flue gas desulfurization is a major effluent thing there, and cooling water blowdown. They used to maintain it ZLD right from 60s and 70s. And in the beginning of 2000, they started making it mandatory for electronic, fertilizer, mining, and some chemical industries. But we need to understand that in many of these cases, it is not actually the 100% ZLD. They recover something like 90 or 95% and discharge some 5% still. So it is a near ZLD, not a full ZLD.
Okay.
In case of China, they have got, again, the power plants are in ZLD, and they have got a certain mining industry, especially the one near to the Mongolia, where there is a lot of mines, but not much of water. There also they have adopted ZLD as a norm. They recycle all the water. In case of countries in Europe, their focus is to reduce the water consumption rather than recycling the water. Many of these people, many of the European countries, especially Germany, have started giving targets by reducing the water consumption to international norms to something like 50%, then 25%, and 10%. They prefer inside recycling rather than end of pipe recycling. They say you take a sectional stream, purify it, and reuse it back. I said that is much more economical, and we may also have to look at it seriously in the future. Right now, it is something like a regulatory thing in India we are doing, because we believe only in policing. We think that, okay, if there is actually what happened, I was also requesting some of the chairmen of pollution control boards in Tamil Nadu that why don't you allow some portion of the water to be discharged instead of recycling endlessly? That makes it much easier for us. They also had a genuine concern. They say, suppose we allow 5% discharge. How do we know that they are discharging only 5%? Using that 5% as a gap, the industry may push the entire thing out. Even today, people are trying to discharge the effluent even when the ZLD is in norm. So how can we trust people? Or what if this 5% which they are sending out is only the reject? And then the environment damage is very high. So right now their approach is to fix up a requirement as ZLD which is easy to monitor. For instance, even the public is now aware of this one. Now ZLD, they are also looking at, and when they see even the stormwater coming out of the CETP area or industry area, they immediately gather and write a complaint saying that there is a discharge from so-and-so industry. So that way it is easier to regulate, but it is a very costly thing.
Yeah.
And in case of Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Mongolia, and many countries in that region, and African countries, as you say, many of them are toying with this idea of ZLD for some last 1 or 2 years. The main reason is they also hear a lot of success story from India. They say, okay, India has gone for ZLD in Tirupur, here in Ranipet, and they are operating it very well. Why can't we? We also have a water problem. We also have a pollution problem like this. So we also need to exchange our information with them. So basic idea is that we have also done a lot of mistakes in the beginning. We also had a lot of failures. We burned our fingers many times. So why should those people also do the same mistakes by spending the money? We need to have an exchange with them honestly, giving the right kind of data. Because last time what happened when I went to Bangladesh, one of the ETP guy was asking me, are you from India? And then I said, yes. But then I don't want to see you. I said, why? What is the big problem with India? He said, last time what happened, there is a consultant from India came in. He said, he was the one who created all the ZLDs in India. He is a very successful person and he did some plan for us. And that is a perpetual headache for me, even after spending something like $1 million. He said, that plant is not working. I am in a big soup. I don't know what to do. Then I said, why didn't you check up? You should have come to India, had gone to some of these plants, had a discussion with our pollution control board people, our government people, before investing money. So this is something which we need to still can do, and they can also do. Because you have got a very important point, because as I understand, Vietnam and Bangladesh is contemplating to make ZLD mandatory by 2022. And I'm very much sure that they are not ready for it. They are also going to end up in the same situation like us, and they are also going to see a lot of mortality of industry, which we could prevent.
So it might get pushed further, probably, the guidelines for following it.
I
may not
think
happen
we
by
should
20.
actually make it happen. They should also come to that one. Many of these countries do not have even the basic effluent treatment.
Okay,
And
so
they
they
talk
should have
about
some,
ZLD already.
yeah. So they should go stage by stage. So at least install
Correct,
some
correct.
form of treatment first and start getting in there. So,
Correct.
in terms of like wastewater treatment for the future, like what technologies do you see coming in? Like what interesting technologies do you see for the future of it? Like do operations have to be made leaner or lower footprint? Which technologies do you think?
Yes, actually, in the slide, you could actually there are quite a few technologies which we can bring in the effluent treatment itself and also in the ZLD. Now, if you look at it, these technologies are developed by the ITRI in Taiwan. ITRI is a research organization which is quite a big organization. If I understand correctly, they have got a couple of thousand PhDs working with
Yes,
them.
yes, yeah.
It's quite a big organization. I think you also have some collaboration with them, if I
Yes,
understand
yes,
correctly.
we've partnered. There are in technology partners. Yes, we've collaborated with them with
So
the.
you got some licensing from them or what?
No, not licensing, but we've partnered with them. So we are promoting the technologies in India for wastewater treatment.
Oh, that's very good. Actually, these three technologies which I mentioned, we are also are collaborating with ITRI. The BioNet is mainly used for removal of ammonia from the nitrogen-rich wastewater. And then for the concentration of reject, because the evaporator is the costliest part in our ZLD. So concentration of reject, we have got two technologies under consideration. One is forward osmosis, which is still in the nascent stage, and I think they are having a big pilot plant which they are trying now, and we are also contemplating a pilot study. And the second is EDR, electrodialysis reversal, for the concentration of the RO reject, so that overall ZLD cost can be brought down. And then there is a system called membrane distillation, which is used mostly in European countries for ZLD plants today instead of RO. So this you can go for a combination of various systems and then go for a future planning. Right now, what is happening, the disadvantage is we are dealing with the treatment plants which have been established something like 20 years back or 30 years back. We are upgrading it one by one. So there are many technologies we may not be able to bring it just like that as a brand new technology. But in future, we can use a combination of this technology which would be more efficient and much more economical than that. So let's hope that that thing will happen. We will get more information from them. And also, from our part, we can also help this other countries, as I mentioned, with our experience in ZLD, and we can also help them. So a lot of collaboration and a lot of technological innovation can happen in future.
Yeah, so we need these technologies along with a lot of automation as well, and bring
Correct.
in intelligent IoT as well to make sure we can bring in more remote monitoring. So
and it is also important to have IoT, especially when you talk about very sophisticated technologies. When you talk about RO, even 1 day, it is like this. For instance, am I running out of time or something?
No.
Sure. Okay, fine. Thank you. For example, effluent treatment, you treat the wastewater and discharge. Once it is discharged, it makes no problem for you. It makes a problem for the public. That is a different part. But you don't have problem afterwards. In case of ZLD, it is a different ball game. For example, if your ATP is not working nicely, all the sludge, for instance, overflows from the ETP. In the first case, nothing big will happen. But if it is suddenly, all this sludge is going to block in the membrane system. And
Yeah.
that blockage is permanent. That blockage is permanent, and the membrane replacement is a very costly affair. Imagine there was an IoT thing. Imagine there is a automatic system which senses the input and find out that, okay, this is exceeding the suspended solids limit, or it's exceeding the organics limit, or exceeding the hardness limit, and cut off automatically that feeding. Then the system will be protected. So that will be, in a long run, it gives you much more comfort level, and it will be much more economical. And also, as I mentioned in the beginning, you cannot take a labor for granted anymore, but it needs a lot of cultural change. We need, actually we are learning, ever since I left America, I came back to India, I take everything for granted. I used to have 2-3 housemates and drivers to take care of everything. So life was taken for granted. And today, the nature has taught us a lesson that you cannot take these things for granted anymore. You will have to change. Now we are learning cooking. Now we are learning many things. Now I am also
I think
thinking of
everybody is
learning.
becoming an expert baker as well during this lockdown.
Yes,
From
correct,
I can see expert baker and
correct,
all
correct,
master chefs. Yes.
correct, correct. And
Thank you, Dr.
so
Manu.
generally
No,
so
no, go on.
generally I think it is a time for us to also look at any questions from
Yeah,
people. How
so
do you
thank
propose
you to
to?
all our attendees for listening to Dr. Emmanuel and patiently listening through his very valuable insights, especially on the standard operating procedures. I think that's very important for us to set up and implement. It's quite key. So anyway, shall we see if we have any questions from any of our attendees right now? We have one question from Miss Priya, who wants to know about how about sludge handling during this lockdown situation.
Okay, that's actually a good question. Yes, right now what is happening is this CTPs which closed itself just like that also have abandoned the plant with the sludge in part. So those people who have followed the norm, they have taken out the sludge, dewatered it, and dumped into temporary dumping yards. Now you are not allowed to transport the sludge to the landfills, hazardous waste landfills. So right now what we are doing is that we dewater it, keep it separate in a temporary yard. And once the lockdown is lifted, this will be shifted to the hazardous waste landfill or the cement factories.
Okay. We have Ms. Lee Kwan Lee from CPC who's
Okay.
joined us as well. So hello, Lee Kwan, and hello to all the team from iTry who also joined us for this discussion. We have another question from Mr. Sasida Damodran who wants to know, will the ZLD become affordable in the future?
ZLD is already possible. Why should we say whether it is possible in future? The only question is, in some of the areas I mentioned, some location and some industry, it is inevitable, mandatory, and it is desirable also. In some cases, we can think of other options. So ZLD is definitely possible, but we should try to apply that technology intelligently, use it only where it is essential, and to think of other options in other places.
Okay. We have another question from Mr. Manika Mongia who wants to know from the salt obtained from the evaporator, how is it handled and can it be transported to leather industry?
Okay, now there are these two industries like leather and textile is left with most of the salt. In textile, some of the salts, especially if they were using sodium sulfate in their dyeing process, they can recover the Glauber salt, which is sodium sulfate, and use it back. So those people are already reusing it back in the form of liquid and also as a solid form. In some industry, where they are using both sodium chloride and sodium sulfate, they get it as a mixed salt. And there, the mixed salt is a problem of disposal everywhere. In tannery, we also have the same problem because the salt which we get from the evaporator is a mixture of 7 salts, not 1 or 2. And it is colored. It is something like a powder salt, which nobody would like you to use back. Now, your other question, can it be used in the tannery? I give you a very interesting answer because tannery doesn't use salt or not much salt. They use only in a very small quantity of salt in a process called pickling. Then the question is, where do they get the salt in their effluent if they are not using it? Actually, very interestingly, the salt in the textile, the leather effluent is brought along with the raw material. It is used in the preservation of hides and skins. And the first operation in the tannery is to wash off that salt, which comes in the effluent. So even if we recover the salt in pure form, it may not be possible for the tanneries to use it back, but it may be possible if you reuse it pure in the preservating unit. We can transport it to the slaughterhouses where they can use this salt in place of fresh salt.
We have a question from Ms. Divya Sundar. I think you touched upon this during the ZLD discussion as to why we are not focusing on reducing water quantity rather than recycling like other countries do.
Okay, now I think that is also an interesting question. I would say that after ZLD, actually we are seeing a lot of water conservation. Now this may look a little bit surprising. Now what is happening in many of these ZLD units, they charge quite a lot of money for the ZLD from the members. Many of them are charging based on the quantity. The quantity of this much cubic meter are discharged to the CP. So earlier, let us say they used to pay X amount. Now, if they reduce the water consumption by half, they need to pay only 50% of that. So many of these people have started consulting people and making modification in the factory to reduce the water consumption, to save money in the ZLD. Now, one of the things, I can give you a classical example. The tannery, the water usage in India, in Calcutta or Kanpur, it can be as high as 50 or 60 liters per kilo of raw material. The guideline which we give in internationally is 30 liters per kilo. And many of the tanneries in the connected to ZLD, the actual consumption is something like 10 liters, 1/3 of the international level. That is not because they want to conserve water, it is only to save money in the ZLD.
Yeah. We have a question from Mr. Istiak who wants to know, keeping the financials involved. Now we're talking about lockdown and reopening. So, if we have to deal with the recession, which may lead to collapse of ETPs, how can we involve government agencies?
I think that is a definitely a very important point, as I mentioned. What we need to do is to have a dialogue. I would say that all CETPs have to join together, either through an association, an industry association. In the case of leather, we have got AISHMA. In the case of textile, we have got other associations, Dyers Association and Exporters Association. These people have to take this up with the government. They have to first take it up with the industry ministry, ask them what can be the support they can provide. And then we have to involve the economical experts about the loans and the financial, overdrafts and all. And also the dialogue with the pollution control boards. So this we need to start right now. This is the right time.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So we got one more from Mr. Mohammed Ashraf, who would like to know, you mentioned about 3% usage of water in industrial usage in India and suggested more to focus on sewerage water recycling and reuse. Can the same scenario is it similar in Bangladesh? Can we apply the same scenario?
Not really. I think Ashraf is from Bangladesh, no? Okay. Ashraf, actually it is different because our industrial consumption is smaller compared to the rest of it. Now, if you look at Bangladesh, the textile industry in Dhaka itself is one of the largest in Asia. Next, it is actually little smaller than China. So they consume, I'm saying in comparison, our textile industry in Tirupur consumes 100 mld of wastewater, 100 mld of water. In Dhaka, the textile industry consumes something like 4,000 mld. It's
Wow.
such a huge amount.
Yeah.
So if you look at Dhaka, you could say about 60% of the total water goes still into agriculture, 25%, 20% goes into urban, and about 30% goes into industry. So there the percentage is much higher.
Yeah. It's quite much higher actually.
Much higher, yes.
Yeah. So I think we have time for one more question. Oh, this is from Dr. Juang from, I think she's removed her question. Sorry, it's from Dr. Akmez, who did his PhD as well from University of Manchester. He wants to know that I think the main challenge facing CTPs and ETPs in the current environment is the treatment of APIs, as India is producing a lot of pharmaceutical compounds. How are ETPs and CTPs going to deal with this?
See, right now the pollution is mostly on the end user levels. There we get a lot of agricultural runoff, which carries a lot of this pollutants. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no much management of that. It is just runoff and contaminate the groundwater. In so far as those factories which produces this, there are ETPs specifically dealing with this kind of remnants of chemicals, and I think generally they are all working very well. So in factory, the pollution is by and large contained, but in the user level, it still is a major problem.
Okay, I think that's all. I think we've come to the end. We've had a very good session. I think we still have a few more questions, which I think we will try and answer it and reply back by email.
And I hope at least you would be circulating some note about this.
Yes, we definitely will be circulating. The recording of this webinar, we'll be uploading it onto our YouTube channel as well. And we should have the transcript of this summary of it uploaded as well shortly. But thank you, Dr. Emmanuel, for joining us.
I wanted to say a word of thanks before that one.
Yes, sure, please.
I was looking at the participant list. I was saying that I'm really, it's an overwhelming response to me. I would say that I could see some 12 PhDs in this list. And,
I think there were much more after you saw the list, yes.
Yeah, actually, I was just looking at the participant list. It is really surprising. There are owners of some of this large wastewater treatment plant, some of them. And I think 7 or 8 companies dealing with wastewater treatment plant. The owners themselves have come for this one. And we have got 6 CETP, including the chairman and the chairman of 3 CTPs and the CEO of 4 CTPs. And we have got quite a lot of professionals working in this field. I was saying that how can I thank all of them? I do not know. You have spent so much of your time and effort in joining me today. Unfortunately, because of this number, we are not able to see face to face, and I'm not able to say thank you to each of them, but please take it as a thank you from our side. And this is also kind of a new kind of a greeting from the Indian thing from future. Okay, thank you all.
It's the pandemic way of greeting for now.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah. So I think all of us have found this session very informative and very useful, including me. And we have this full recording and will be uploaded on YouTube probably by tomorrow on our channel. We'll have a summary of this discussion as well, uploaded on our LinkedIn page and our website. And we will also, Dr. Manuel and I will also be having some discussions with regard to, trying to upload like some sort of SOPs which ETPs can work on and start following for their startup and hopefully even for their shutdown. So, whatever to prevent any damage of their membranes. So thank you all of you, and I hope you enjoyed it. We will have our next webinar, which will be again next week on the 22nd of April at 5 p.m., so a week from today. The spotlight on that session will be focused on the impact of COVID-19 on manufacturing and innovations that we can see arising due to this disruption. So hopefully, on the area of automations and sensors, as you were also mentioning, Dr. Emmanuel. And the guest speaker will be Dr. K.V. Subramaniam, the Executive Director at PowerGear R&D, who is an eminent scientist with over 50 patent applications and an expert in his field as well. So please join us as well next week, 22nd at 5 p.m. The registration link will be shared on our LinkedIn page and will be shared with all of you as well by email. Thank you all and hope to see you all again next week. Until then, please all of you be well, stay safe and keep washing your hands. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.